Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I am your host, the Football Grump, and this is Mike the Cranky Fan.
This is Breakfast with the Grump. This is the earliest we've ever recorded. I am coming to you live from St. Pete, Florida. I'm down here for Florida USF this weekend, and unfortunately, I took a late flight last night, so we have to do this super early Friday morning. So you get to see our ugly morning mugs today.
Yeah, we're starting off the season a little shaky because we got to do this one the day it's coming out, and then next week we jump right into a Thursday night game, which is both bullshit and annoying. So. It's a shaky start for us. It's a shaky start for the Giants. They are hosting the Denver Broncos Sunday at 4:25 at MetLife Stadium, and it's not really, I don't know, what I would consider the best matchup in the universe to start off the season. Would you agree?
I mean, it's the NFL. I mean, you could say there's tough matchups in every game. So. Not ideal with the the defense of Denver, but something I keep reminding myself that people are so doom and gloom about this game and already marking it off as a loss. If you look in Vegas, their win over under number is only 7.5. So we're not talking about a team that's making their reservations to the Super Bowl just yet. So let's not get ahead of ourselves and freak out because of the limited amount we've seen for the offensive line in preseason. Let's talk about this rationally and see where we go.
Yeah, yet though I believe the Giants are going in as 2.5 point underdogs though.
That's right. I mean, that doesn't mean that public sentiment about this craziness is out there. It's just, let's think about this realistically and see if this is actually a good investing opportunity or not.
Yeah. But anyway, we're coming to you live this morning. Not live. We're coming to you from YouTube for only the second time. So be sure to like, subscribe, and let other people know as well that we are on YouTube now, which is much cooler.
And if you're still old school and you want to listen to us on the podcast, you know where to subscribe: iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, all the normal places. So if you've liked us before on podcast, keep listening there. If you're
more for the YouTube,
welcome, and hopefully you have your safety glasses on looking at our faces. But, away we go for another Giant season starting this weekend.
Yeah, and we're coming into this one with plenty of headlines because it is week one. This is probably the hardest episode to do, I would say, in my opinion, because we're just basing... You don't want to base anything on preseason, but you can't base things on last year, So... It just comes down to some of our best guesswork and stuff, but there's plenty of headlines coming into this. And for starters, the Broncos are starting Teddy Bridgewater over Drew Lock to start the season this year. I would say that I'm not entirely surprised by that.
Not at all. I mean, I thought it was even silly that there was a quarterback battle all preseason. I mean, to me, Teddy Bridgewater, he's a solid. I think he's a solid starter in the NFL. And Drew Lock is not. So, I mean, injuries aside and everything, and, just because you're on a second or third team doesn't mean that you are, useless as a quarterback. And so, to me, he's a starting quarterback. I think that was all like a big charade, maybe a little gamesmanship before game one. But this is who I expected to see as their starting quarterback.
I find these two teams to be very interesting, and I find this matchup to be a kind of a bummer because – I would say they're in a fairly similar. That was weird. A fairly similar state right now. I'd say the Giants are just slightly ahead of where the Broncos are in terms of building a team. Vic Fangio is a defensive guy. He's kind of built that defense first. It's a good defense. It's a good roster that Denver has put together on the defensive side of the ball. And, offensively, we see kind of, I would say, similar struggles in terms of the defensive side that you can put a lot more trust into, but the offensive side is kind of a mess. But they're a little different, right? The Giants right now have spent the offseason they went out, they've gotten the quarterback that they hope is the future of the franchise, and this last offseason they have just dumped money into upgrading this team, but specifically the talent around Daniel Jones. Whereas Denver is kind of in a weird situation where they went out, they got their quarterback that they hope is the future of the franchise. He's not ready yet, so he's not even playing. He may not, I mean, just as Daniel Jones is, but may not be the future of the franchise at all. But instead of surrounding him with skill position players, it seems that like a lot of the investment was in that offensive line, and so we have two separate kind of offensive situations, but otherwise, from a team perspective, the same kind of thing where we have a quarterback you're not sure that you trust, and he's got to limit his mistakes, but defensively you feel pretty comfortable. So it's kind of an odd matchup. It's almost like a mirror matchup to start the season.
Yeah, I mean, say what you want about Daniel Jones, the Giants have their quarterback that they've invested the future in, and he's what they're rolling with for the foreseeable future. At least this year, at least next year, maybe the year after. Where Teddy Bridgewater is, I just gave him probably more praise than he deserves, but he's kind of a stopgap solution for them. And when you're rebuilding a team, you only have X amount of resources. You only have X amount of draft capital to spend. You have X amount of salary cap money you can spend. So you can't fix everything all at once. And the Giants, made the decisions last year to upgrade, the secondary and the wide receivers and everything. But the offensive line, there are some pieces still that need to be addressed. And people are complaining about our offensive line. It's just like it can't all be solved in one season. So it just has to be incremental changes, and the Giants are in the middle of that. So that's kind of where they are right now, getting comparing the two teams.
And what's very interesting is that I sit here and tell you that they're in a similar situation, these teams, and in kind of getting ready for this episode, I found that the team that has spent the most money on its secondary is the Denver Broncos in the whole league, and for this year, and the team with the second most cash investment into their secondary is the New York Giants.
Yeah,
So I mean,
that
they're
makes a lot of
very
sense.
similar. Yeah.
I mean, in this league now, the way the league is, and if you watch the game last night, which we'll talk about in a little bit,
Yeah.
you better have a good secondary. You better be able to handle teams throwing 50 times and throwing all over the place. So, having a good secondary is just as important as having a good pass rush and being able to stop the run. You can't neglect it, and you have to spend money on it. Good corners they're going to get very expensive in the open market. So that's how that price tag jumps up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to your credit about the offensive line, the Giants had their own news come out this week. Kind of a big headline. It was a shock to me. Nate Solder was named as the starting right tackle for the Giants going to Week 1. We were talking before. I want to say, what was it, last week? We were talking. Nate Solder may not even make this team. He played so poorly in that final preseason game that you suggested it, and I didn't. I could see that for sure. He I don't know if he had a single good rep in that final preseason game, and I don't want to harp too much on preseason, but it's also been a year since he's played. He hasn't played right tackle since I want to say the Giants were in the Super Bowl.
And in that year before, he didn't look good. He was awful too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like he's coming off a Pro Bowl
Right.
performance. He's working his way back. Yeah.
Yeah, so a little shocking. Matt Parrott didn't. He certainly didn't grab the job and run away with it. So I get why it happened, but it doesn't make me feel very happy. And this is obviously where the main matchup that we're gonna watch is going to be Andrew Thomas, who had a shitty fourth preseason game, but otherwise had a solid preseason and training camp, and Nate Solder, who had a shitty everything since 2019, is going up against Von Miller and Bradley Chubb.
Well, Chubb, I do not think is going to play.
You don't think he's going to play? That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's kind of, from all the things I've been reading and seeing and stuff, I have a feeling he's not going to play. So that would be a huge sigh of relief for Giant fans out there. We're talking again about, we just said this thing about Andrew Thomas had a bad fourth preseason game, and and Solder having a bad game. The thing, we always have to remind ourselves is that we watch probably 1/100th of the snaps that go on during training camp. We see what we see in these limited amount of appearances in preseason on TV. The coaches see every drill, every snap, every situational thing they put these guys through. They know more than we do. And, we see a small snapshot of how these guys look. And, if they think that Nick Solder is the best solution right now at right tackle, they're not doing it because they're trying to be funny or trying to be, smart asses or something. They honestly must see something during, Monday through Thursday during training camp that we haven't seen. So if you trust this coaching staff, and we like to say how much we like Joe Judge and his, we think he's an up and coming coach. We have to kind of put our trust in it that they're making the right move right now. It's going to bear out very quickly over these first couple of games, but I think that's just kind of the way we have to roll right now.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a shock to me, but at the end of the day, I have to just bank on what the coaches are seeing. They clearly gave Matt Peart every opportunity to earn the job, and so when they don't give him the job, I have to think that there is a legitimate reason for it. This isn't, lunacy. Yeah. It's Matt certainly Peart, not a good position to be in.
Yeah, remember though when they drafted Peart, the words we said, and I think the words you said were kind of, this is a bit of a project.
Oh yeah.
And to me, a project is like 2-3 years down the road, and this is his second year, but like this has been a crazy 2 years. Basically, last year, we said this countless times on this show, it was so crazy with no offseason and things. It's almost like a wash. So, it'd be interesting to hear what this coaching staff has for a timeline for him to be realistic. Is when they expect him to be like a legitimate starter and ready to go. So it might be right according to what their plan is for him, based on his developmental needs and how he's progressing along.
Yeah, I mean that you could be right, and we would never have that insight, to be honest. Because even if coaches said that at a press conference, we would just say like, "Oh, they're just that's just the right answer to justify whatever." So yeah, you're right.
He might be close enough along that they think they can just fill the gap with a guy like Nate Solder, not have to go out and get somebody else to fill that spot. I mean, it might be something where, we think in about 3 or 4 weeks that he'll be ready to take over and away we go, or a couple of weeks, or maybe there might be a little tweak that he has or something that he's not 100% ready to go, that maybe not even be worthy enough to be on a injury report, but just like, let's start with Solder to get started, and then that transition will happen. So I'm not overly concerned about Peart, like his development or why isn't he starting. I'm more concerned about Solder starting, the person.
Yeah.
But I'm not looking into this anything as like, what's the long-term implication is, or what does this mean? If we're having this show on November 1st and Solder's still starting, well, one of two things: one, he's playing well and he's still starting, or we can have that conversation about Peart. What's his story?
Yeah, and this pass rush is going to be like probably the main thing in this game. We can't have Daniel Jones under fire immediately and on every time he drops back in this game. It won't end well.
Well, we're around for any quarterback, and especially him.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I'm not even really worried about him, but I want to see him be able to develop and grow, and it just seems like it's been forever since he's just been able to play a game from a clean pocket for most of the game. He's had a start to his career where every drop back is usually, somebody's coming at him in the whole time he's been here. I would just love for a game to not have that happen, but that's probably not going to happen in this game. Now, what's interesting is you think that Chubb is not going to play. He's basically the only one on the Denver injury report. He is limited. He's dealing with an ankle that has been nagging for quite a while, but he's played throughout the preseason. Noah Fant, Miller, Okwebunam, and Cortland Sutton, they were all full participants in practice with their various nicks and bruises. But Chubb, has been kind of just popped up on the injury report this week. So I find it interesting. You don't think he's going to play. I think that was like random gamesmanship from Fangio. I think he's just tossed him on the injury report and stuff.
I've heard a couple of podcasts with some Denver people, Denver insiders and stuff, and they were kind of, I don't know, I'm not so confident he's going to play or not. So that's where I'm kind of coming from. And it's one thing if you're just reading just the transcripts of what the coaches say or listen to the their media sessions, and you can tell when someone's saying bullshit or not, when it's complete coach speak. But I got the sense there was definitely kind of a doubtfulness about the tone of some of these guys. So, I mean, if he plays, I'm not going to be super shocked, and I'm not going to be like, oh, but I if you put a gun to my head, I have a feeling he's not going to play. Or if it is, it's very, very limited.
That's interesting. The Broncos do have kind of a decent rotation at the outside, but not having Chubb available for this game would be monumental. Or having him in some limited capacity would be beneficial as well. So that's really interesting. Von Miller missed all of last year. In the preseason games I've watched, and again, I acknowledge that the preseason, I just don't have anything recent to watch otherwise. He's looked like his old self. Chubb, I will say, has looked in the preseason a bit slow, maybe not as confident. And I also acknowledge that he's not probably going 100% in a preseason game. So I don't know, though. It could be a lingering ankle thing. I'm going to assume that Andrew Thomas is going to have to deal with him.
Oh, I would prepare for the worst and hope to be pleasantly surprised. But I just I have a feeling he's not going to be there, which would be a great thing for Andrew Thomas. That's for sure.
Yeah. The flip side is the Giants' injury report here. It's obviously much longer. They've been dealing with injuries to all of camp. But it seems like just about everybody besides Evan Ingram is looking like they're going to play. Now, this is Friday morning, so this is the practice today that may change everything that we're recording and releasing for you. But I mean, that's why you follow us on Twitter at @football_grump. Where I can amend these kind of statements. But, the practice report's a lot longer. But, Adoree Jackson, Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney, Kyle Rudolph, Saquon Barkley, and Shane Lemieux, those are your usual suspects. They all appear as if they are going to play. Toney is officially listed as a hamstring injury, by the way. I don't know if that was ever actually said by a coach.
It hasn't been. We all assumed it was COVID-related fallout.
Mm-hmm.
We never actually heard hamstring before.
Right.
And I believe his junior year at UF, he dealt with a hamstring and was out for a few games for that. So this is nothing, I don't know if it's related to something that happened, 2 years ago, but he had a hamstring issue prior to this.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll get to him in just a second. But Andrew Thomas popped up there with an ankle. Caden Smith, Danny Shelton, Josh Jackson still, obviously, and, the new guy, Justin Hilliard. But Evan Ingram seems to be the only one that we are not expecting to be there. He had that non-contact calf injury that looked kind of bad. I don't know that we were ever given a severity of the injury, ever. But he clearly didn't look happy going to the locker room.
The insiders have been pretty down on it all this week about his potential to play, and I've been going into mindset this week that he's not playing.
Yeah, and I don't see the need to force him in there. I mean, I know that we're all down on Evan Ingram in general, but he is a dynamic player and somebody in the middle of the field that you'd want to throw the ball to. But I don't see an issue. I would not rush him along for week one.
His reputation around the league is a lot greater than what Giant fans think of Evan Ingram. I mean, the guy was voted a Pro Bowler last year. I mean, that sounds really silly, but there's enough of his perception out there that he's a guy you have to kind of game plan a little bit for, and he's a mismatch problem. So not having him on the field, either if he doesn't have the production that Giant fans are hoping for, or those, drops at the wrong time, it's still a presence out there, and it's a game planning presence that, the drop off to Caden Smith or something is a lot different.
Yeah. It different, but I wouldn't say necessarily like a overall drop off. They're just kind of different. I don't think you'd ever really use Caden Smith and Evan Ingram on plays designed for each other. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, that's what I mean, though. I mean, you're game planning more for a more dynamic play from a guy like Evan Ingram.
Hmm.
Something that you're trying to how do I overcome a mismatch potential when you're game planning for someone like him, where it's different with Caden Smith.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And speaking of game planning, that's kind of the other matchup I want to watch here. It's kind of difficult coming up with matchups to watch when we've had such an extensive injury report, and it's week one. I mean, I don't know what to think of a lot of these Broncos players, now in this system. But I am very interested to see Patrick Graham and Pat Shurmur going head to head. I like Pat Shurmur as an offensive coordinator. I think he's, I wouldn't say brilliant, but I would.
That's why he got the job as the Giant head coach.
Immediately got the job as an offensive coordinator upon his firing as well.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how that works. I mean, he's worked with Teddy Bridgewater in Minnesota as well, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, bringing in a guy that he's comfortable with, that I don't know if he remembers the offense or knows it especially well, but just that he's comfortable with working. He's got a good working relationship. He knows his skill set pretty well.
It's like riding a bike for a lot of these things. You may need a little brush up on the terminology, but an offense is an offense.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're not dropping them in, today saying, "Oh, remember what we did 3 years ago?" I mean, they've gone through a whole off season in a training camp and all that. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, but I'm expecting a little bit more, out of the second year in this Broncos offense, and now with Teddy Bridgewater there, who's more of a fit maybe for what Pat Shurmur wants to do. But on the flip side now, Patrick Graham has all of the tools on the outside to let him play a lot more man coverage that he didn't get to play last year, and do a lot more aggressive and exotic looking blitzes to fluster Teddy Bridgewater, who is average. With the athleticism that he is now left with after his injury, I would say he is average. He's probably not going to lose you a game, but maybe he'll win you one close game a year.
I think the Giant defense is in a position where it's going to be, when we look back in November, and you can bookmark this, is going to be one of the storylines of the year. The Giants, I think, are going to, we've done our schedule preview earlier, during the offseason. The Giants are going to overachieve based on what people think they're going to do, and the big reason is going to be the defense. And the defense is going to, at times, really shine and be kind of like that. It's been a surprise how well the Giant defense is, where anybody who watches the Giants know the foundation was built last year and the pieces they built in this offseason. So, this Giant defense is on the breakout of being nationally respected as really good. And I think a game like today might kind of, be one of those spotlight games to see how good this defense is.
Oh, sure. This is like, you've been saving up for months and looking at I don't know cars, but like a new Corvette, and you've finally got it, and you've filled out all the paperwork for the title and stuff, and Sunday afternoon is the keys. You get the keys and you're going to drive it home. So you're going to want to take the long way and test out all different things, and maybe we'll take it on the highway and see how fast it can go. This is the keys to the car game for Patrick Graham a little bit. I mean, still going to want to dial back some of the more complicated stuff and hold things from film as well.
Yeah, I think the defense, going back to my point, I don't think it's being disrespected. I just think with all the other narratives about the Giants that are out there, the offensive line, Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, blah, 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 bad division. I think what's buried, is the fact that this is a very good defense and was a very good defense and will be an even better defense this year.
Yeah.
And, if the Giant offense is, sputtering along because, Daniel Jones is having his issues, the offensive line can't block and his stuff, that this team is kind of built for that with the defense, that they can, if they're gonna have to play some games in the muck, we can do that. Where, if you watch some of these, like if you want to take last night's game, those are two teams that are not built to play in the muck. They're gonna have to score a lot of points to win.
weird because you'd think that Dallas was built for that, but they certainly didn't call a game like that.
They're yeah, the defense they have, they're gonna have to outscore everybody.
Yeah, true.
I mean, that's it. But I'm saying with this giant defense, that if we're not getting optimal play, that's okay.
Speaking of defense, my keys to this game are going to be a lot more general than they normally would be throughout the year. But that's mainly because this is week 1 and we're still seeing things for the first time legitimately in this game that's upcoming. So, but for me, when I look at this matchup, defensively, what is going to be a key is going to be stopping the run. I know Giants fans are probably tired of hearing people prioritize establishing and stopping the running game, but for this game, I think it's going to be true. I'm not particularly worried about Teddy Bridgewater throwing for 500 yards against this secondary that we've assembled, and we're just talking about it, especially with the skill position players that they have. I mean, they're not. It's not that they're not good; it's that they're not very deep at skill position. So. They kind of have 3 wide receivers that are like, okay, whatever. But we're not talking about this group of 5 wide receivers that's going to require, good man coverage on all of them.
This isn't Dallas. These aren't guys that are, dynamic game changers on their own.
Yeah. But Denver's looked good moving the ball on the ground. I know, again, that this is just preseason, but, I mean, it makes sense that they look good moving the ball on the ground. They have a pretty damn good offensive line. They have Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams. That's a deadly backfield behind that solid offensive line. Meanwhile, the Giants' offensive starters in that final preseason game did look pretty disappointing against the run. Those first couple drives where you had the starters out there, all the starters, besides Adoree Jackson, I think might be the only one on defense that wasn't there. They were kind of getting cut up by New England, and that was disappointing for me. Does any of what we saw in preseason actually mean anything? No, not really. But it doesn't change the fact that the Broncos match up far better on the ground than they do in the air. So for me, I think the secondary mostly shutting down Teddy Bridgewater is kind of a given. I would say it's an expectation, but the key here is going to be also stopping him on the run and letting the Giants offense control the game rather than the Broncos offense.
That was one of my points I have written here, is that stopping Teddy Bridgewater with his legs to extend plays and drives. If it's 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 2 or something, contain him, make him beat us over, in the air. The worst thing you want to see is 3rd and 6, and he gets out of containment, out of pressure. He gets the first down. Does that little run to the sideline, get right past the yard marker, and another 4 minutes, the defense is on the field. I think if this defense can limit the time of possession battle and not be on the field for 35, 36 minutes, it's a much greater chance to win. The longer they're out there, this is game 1 still, and this is the first time these guys are playing 60 minutes. They in preseason, you play X amount of snaps and X amount of drives, and that's that. This is where attrition starts to, and your cardio and how tired you're going to be later in the game is going to kick in. So let's, not saying every drive has to be 3 and out, but let's not have drives extended just because Teddy Bridgewater is extending plays. That to me is the big key on defense.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. They've got to be a little bit better in contain, than they have been in the preseason. They've been a little wild there.
You also have to think too. You have to think also in preseason how much game planning is actually being done in these games as opposed to
yeah.
We're doing our base things offensively and defensively. Now, all of a sudden, you're talking about now how are we going to game plan specifically for this opponent, this quarterback? It's different. So again, I don't. Fundamentals in preseason are kind of things you look for, but actually, results over a game, I take a little bit of a grain of salt, and I'm doing it the same with, thinking about Denver as much as I am with the Giants.
Yeah, absolutely. Offensively, my key here is to start fast. I know the strength of this team is going to be defense, but it's still a weakness, this offensive line, at least right now. I'm not saying it can't get fixed throughout this year, because I do think they have a decent group of guys put together, but whenever I have a fear about another team's pass rush, my advice is usually to start fast, because nothing quite slows down a pass rush like, from playing from behind. I mean, you can't take those risky, aggressive blitzes and just run wild with them if you're behind.
Well, also, if you're ahead, you have more options on offense. You don't have to be throwing 60 times trying to catch up.
Also
So
true.
if you have a lead or something, you can rely a little more on your running game and kind of, shorten the game.
Again, which also slows down a pass rush. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as it is, I'm worried about the 4-man rush. Let alone a 5 or 6-man rush. Ending that shit early is going to be important for putting the points on the board early. Can push that defense in more conservative posture, allow Jones and the offense to just settle, get comfortable. And on the flip side, this also is going to put the pressure on Teddy Bridgewater, who's not the kind of quarterback that you'd want to throw a whole lot of responsibility on the shoulders in the midst of a game. Might start making some mistakes, and it also allows Patrick Graham can be really aggressive, and extend that lead, kind of prevent Pat Shurmur from throwing downfield like he likes to do. So for me, putting points on the board real quick, those first 2 drives are going to be important. If you come away with 10 points in the first 2 drives, you're in a good spot. 14 obviously is perfect, but
the first 2 drives on the defense as well. We don't want to be down 7-0 after the first drive. So we're really asking for points on the board early and a defense that kind of stands its ground for right now. They kind of go hand in hand, I think, with this fast start.
Yeah, and the Giants are not really a fast start offense. They weren't last year anyway. We don't really know if they are this year, but it doesn't look super promising. But the Broncos are really bad. I mean, last year on opening drives, they have 0 touchdowns, 9 points on opening drives last year. All of last year for the Broncos. That's bad.
That's awful. That's really bad. Well, and again, we're not talking about a fast, we're not saying that they need to go down in a minute 30, go the length of the field and score. We're talking about we want results at the end of these first 2 drives. We want, 10 points would be fantastic. That's kind of would be what we were looking for. We don't want 2 3 and outs.
Exactly. That's kind of my point, is making those first 2 drives worth it. 10 points is obviously what you're probably shooting for. 14 is perfect, and 7 would be acceptable. But 0 on the first 2 drives is going to put this game in a position that they probably don't want to be playing from.
Of course.
We're right around the half-hour mark, so is it prediction time?
It is prediction time.
I'll let you go first. Jump into it.
Week 1s are crazy. Week 1s, to me, if you're a gambler, you're so excited. You would bet on how long the national anthem is in week 1. You would bet on what color jerseys come out there, all these different things. But it's the stupidest week to bet because we just don't know a lot of things. We're going off limited information. We're going off of, the tiny speck of what we saw in preseason games as opposed to overall training camp. And I think it leads to a lot of narratives, that may or may not apply anymore. And I think this is one of those games where these narratives have been built up for the longest time, pretty much since they announced the schedule of, the Giants' offensive line is not good, will not be able to handle a pass rush, and will be a disaster. And I just have a feeling, and I said this in our previews over the summer, that I think the Giants are going to win this game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game in the muck. I think, the Giants will have trouble with the pass rush. I think Daniel Jones will be on his ass more than we'd like to be. But that Giant defense, again, is really good. And I think this is not one of the more dynamic offenses we're going to see this year. And I think they will do their job to keep the score low. And keeping the score low, doesn't mean we have to, throw for 400 yards or have to score 35 points or have to dominate the line of scrimmage, the offensive line. We just have to do enough to get the job done. And I think, our defense is going to become a story, more and more and more as the year goes on. And I think we do just enough on offense. And I think Teddy Bridgewater, we get him to force him to make a mistake or two, flip the field, you know, a low-scoring game. I think the Giants win this kind of low-scoring, something like 20-13.
I think that I am somewhere right around where you are. I think this game, week ones are sloppy. You've got two teams that, like I said, from my perspective, they're in a similar situation. I would say the Giants are slightly ahead, but I mean it's all relative. It all depends on how the offensive line works. Because if that's not working, if that's a disaster Sunday, then they're going to look a lot closer than I think people want to realize. And I think it's strange that fans from both teams are very confident about this game. Broncos, I mean, I know whatever. It's week one, and fans are
cautiously optimistic. I'm not confident. I would not go to Vegas and put a bet on this game, but I just have a sneaky feeling about this game.
I think I feel the same way as you. I feel optimistic. I'm looking forward to this. I think they're going to come away with a win, but I don't think that this is a cakewalk by any stretch.
Oh, no,
but fans for both teams they're adamant that this is the easy game. I think that this is a bad matchup. I think Denver sucks. I think they're not going to be very good. But Denver does have a really good defense, period. They have a very good secondary. They have a very good pass rush. The Giants' offensive line is bad. And until they play well, I'm not going to say that they're good. So I think this is going to be kind of a mess of a game. Not a lot of touchdowns being scored. Certainly not last night.
The Giants have a perception problem right now nationally. And it's been snowballing over the last couple of weeks that they're considered one of the a team that's going to win 6 games. Most national people are. Daniel Jones has been taking a beating nationally by the talking heads. The offensive line we all know. So the perception of this team may not be exactly aligned with this team actually is. And the only way you change that perception is hanging W's on the scoreboard.
Hell yeah, man.
Playing better than people think you are. That doesn't mean overachieving necessarily. It's just playing to what we actually think they are. So I think that perception cleaning starts this week. Not that I think that the Giants are so much better than Denver. I just don't think the Giants overall are as bad as the Stephen A. Smiths and the Bill Simmons of the world, the guys who have the loud microphones and are shaping perception for a lot of people. Not the hardcore football fans, but the ones that you have a conversation with a buddy of yours. Oh, the Giants suck. Why do they suck? Well, the offensive line stinks. Like, okay, well, now's a chance to kind of prove how good or bad you are.
Yeah. I think they eke out a win, but I think this is going to be mostly field goals and some sloppy play, and I think there's going to be some big broken things and things like that. I have the Giants hanging 26-20. I think that's how I've got that one going.
Yeah, I think we're similar. I don't think there'll be as much scoring as that in this game, but I think the sentiment's kind of there. I'm saying like the game last night, you saw it was very sloppy. Mm-hmm. There were silly turnovers that weren't even like real turnovers, like balls popping out of receivers' hands. A lot of penalties, a lot of stuff. Like if these two teams played later in the year, the game may not be so close because you're taking away the elements of the game that make a game closer. Right. Dallas is in that game because of 4 turnovers, not because they're playing, step for step with Tampa Bay in that game.
Not even a little bit. Let's get into that. Because normally what we would do is this episode would be Friday morning, recorded Thursday night, and we give you our predictions for the whole NFC East.
Real quick, before we do that, one thing we haven't talked about, which is, I guess, it's pretty unusual, I guess, for a Giant podcast. We haven't mentioned 26 once.
He's going to play. I mean, like I mentioned, he's on the injury report, but everybody seems to think he's going to play. I think he plays. I think he has a controlled set of snaps.
That was my question. Is what is your reasonable expectation for what he's going to do in this game?
Less than 10 carries.
I was going to say 10.
Snaps or carries?
I think I'll have 10 carries. I think I'll have 12 to 15 snaps.
Yeah, I'm right around there with you. Somewhere in there. 20 would be the absolute maximum, barring overtime, in terms of snaps. But yeah, I mean, that's a difference maker. But again, until I see it, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's going to have some breakout game. I would like to see him rip off some crazy ass 20-yard run though.
The fact that he's even out there and is being considered is something that the Denver coaching staff has to think about, and that is kind of a win in itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's whip around the league. I had predicted actually that Tampa Bay was going to win 31-17. I was not that far off. If I had factored in Tampa Bay giving the ball over 4 times, 3 kind of, I probably would have had a closer score prediction. The game ended 31-29.
Yeah, I mean they were just about to score and had a turnover. That one pick that just bounced off the receiver's hands, that's fluky. That changes everything. That changes field position. That changes time possession. It changes all these different things. Let's talk more really quickly about Dallas for a second, because that's who we care about more. How successful is Dallas going to be this year if they have to throw the ball 50 times?
That's weird. Dak Prescott came in with a shoulder injury that kept him out of all preseason. Now either that was bullshit or they've just made a calculated risk having him run the ball only 10 times.
Something like that.
Yeah, ridiculous. If that's what they want to do, this is Mike McCarthy, and this is who he is, and I don't give a shit about he took a year off to learn from his mistakes and the things that he won a Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl despite Mike McCarthy, not the other way around.
I think it's just weird also throwing the ball so much when you have a bad defense. Why are you having shorter, a game plan of shorter offensive series by throwing the ball more and putting that sieve out there? I don't understand it.
Look, I don't know. It would not have been my game plan. I felt like Zeke was only just starting to hit his stride at the very end of the game because of that. He was
fresh.
Yeah, if that was their plan, was to kind of like hang and then just kind of wear down, they didn't do it. But they were set up to kind of do it. They were losing. I would have said that was a bad game plan. That was. I'm not shocked.
Would you feel better if they came in when they played the Giants with that game plan than what ideally they would do with the personnel they have?
Hell yes. Absolutely. Dak, throw it to secondary, please.
Please go for it.
The Chargers are at Washington on Sunday. This is kind of interesting because I don't really know what to think of Washington and the Chargers right now. They look better than what I expected. I have the Chargers winning this one 23-16. I think the game is just going to be kind of a mess as they get settled.
I guess the question is, when does that 4-game Fitzmagic streak happen? Is it happen at the beginning of his regime in Washington, or does it happen later in the year? That's kind of, if he's Fitzmagic, it's a pretty good team. If he's not, this offense can struggle. It's a good defense, but you have to score in this league too. So I think the Chargers are a sleeper team for me to like going really far in the playoffs. I think they've been on the East Coast a little longer than you normally would to kind of acclimate themselves for, time zone changes and everything. I think the Chargers go in there and win also. 23-14 type of thing. The older Fitzpatrick gets, the less likely it is for him to have to be, what you kind of stereotype him to be. So I don't think he's the stopgap that they need is going to be successful. I think Chargers win.
And then real quick, last one, Philadelphia is at Atlanta. This was, to me, honestly, the hardest one to predict because both of these teams are so bad on paper. They're just brutal. I have Philadelphia actually winning this game because Atlanta looks like shit. But I think it's going to be a high-scoring mess. 31-27 Philadelphia.
I don't know where Philly's getting 31 points from. I actually have Philly as one of my elimination picks this week as being, for losing. Until Philly shows me they can do anything, I'm not picking them once this year. I think they're
fair enough.
I think they're going to be one of the 2 or 3 worst teams in the league. I think they're right up there with Houston for being, and maybe even still Jacksonville as being, just the dregs of this league. I think it just becomes a high-scoring game, but not in their favor of scoring a lot of points. I think they're going to lose something like 35-17.
Okay. Fair enough. So, we got to run. This episode's getting a little long, so be sure to follow us on Twitter at @football_grump, at the Cranky Fan. We will be at the game on Sunday, probably hang out in the Jameson room for about the hour before kickoff, maybe an hour and a half before kickoff. And if we're there even earlier, we'll probably just be wandering around and stuff like that.
Yeah, I got the first of my 7 a.m. flights to get back from Florida USF. I think I landed Kennedy at like 10 o'clock. So the motorcade will be helping me get through the New York City to the Meadowlands and be there as soon as I can. So be there for have a drink with you guys. So follow us on Twitter. We'll let you know where we are. Come say hello and let's talk some Giant football together.
All right, everyone. We will see you Sunday, and we'll see you for an episode the next day. All right, everyone. Go Giants.
Go Giants.